I'm Christopher Schoenwald, and welcome to Life as a show intently focused on helping people find their professional pathway by exploring and unearthing the details of jobs from around the world. Before we get into today's episode, I just want to throw this out there. I have a channel over on YouTube, Life as a ... which basically hosts highlights from these audio conversations that I have with these great guests. They typically run 10 to 15 minutes, and they're there to kind of present a different vantage point. You know, for people that aren't into audio, aren't into podcasts, but are still looking for career advice, ideas, help, all that great stuff, send them over to YouTube. Like I said, Life as a ... And if you do get over there, I would love that like or subscribe. I mean, it's the best way to let that algorithm know that the content is worth sharing and should be out there. So anyway, I do thank you for letting me plug this a little bit, but I think it's about time to get into today's episode. As you know, being an entrepreneur can look very different pending several factors, such as the type of business, its size, its market, and of course aspirations of owners. Heck, considering some of the past entrepreneurs we've interviewed here on Life as a, from a one-man surfboard shaper business out of Hawaii to the founder of a billion-dollar translation business, which had 93 offices worldwide, listeners of this program have heard firsthand all about how varied the entrepreneurial experience can be. Well, in today's episode, we're going to be stepping into a conversation that is both timely and, dare I say, aspirational in nature for a lot of would-be business owners. We're going to get into the world of tech, and more specifically AI and the dream of growing a business to scale. Now, just to set the stage a bit for you, our guest is someone who is on track to be one of the next big breakout tech stars. Take the fact that his company is already a $150 million enterprise and still growing by leaps and bounds. It's raised over $46 million in funding and is riding this massive wave of AI tech transformation taking place in many markets. Yeah, he and his business are the real deal. So if you're into entrepreneurship, technology, AI, or just up for an all-around fascinating conversation, stick around. I think you're going to like this one. Well, first up, let me more formally introduce him to you, and we can launch into things. After spending time at some of the most complex organizations and companies in the world, the White House, Apple, and Lyft, Adam Nathan realized he was spending more time coordinating work than actually doing it. And taking inspiration from how developers worked in GitHub and designers worked in Figma, he founded Almanac to build a tool to help teams collaborate in documents with structure and transparency. Now in 2023, Adam launched his second product, Blaze, the #1 marketing AI tool for teams of one to create better content in half the time. Now, Adam himself holds systems engineering and economic degrees from Duke University and an MBA with highest honors from Harvard Business School. So with all this noted, love to welcome you to my conversation with Adam Nathan. Yeah, so welcome to the program. How are you doing today, Adam?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've been looking forward to this talk for a while, just based off of the topical matter here, AI, talk of the town. It's on everybody's mind. And it's great to speak with somebody who's definitely within that world and living and breathing it every single day. So yeah, for that alone, I'm excited for this. With that in mind, I do have this first segment lined up. It's something called Coloring Wikipedia. As my listeners know, it's a segment where I just read off a definition of something related to what the guest is all about. Now, surprise, surprise, I went with AI. So let me just read that off for you, and perhaps you could comment after. Sound okay?
Sure.
Okay, so here we go. AI, artificial intelligence, or AI, in its broadest sense, is intelligence exhibited by machines, particularly computer systems. It is a field of research in computer science that develops and studies methods and software that enable machines to perceive their environment and use learning and intelligence to take actions that maximize their chances of achieving defined goals. Such machines may be called AIs. Now, admittedly, anyone with a heartbeat at this point knows what AI is referring to, but what I'm more interested here, and the purpose of this segment, is to hear from guests themselves based off of their experiences, opinions and whatnot. First take, what would you say to that, Adam?
Well, I find that definition you read pretty confusing myself. And I think often people are confused about what AI means. Historically, AI has been used as a catch-all for whatever the frontier technology is. So mobile phones or GPS at one point were called AI. And what we refer to today in 2025 as AI is actually this thing called LLMs, large language models. And so if you use ChatGPT or Claude, that's an LLM. And I think, some folks may read headlines like, oh, that these AI models are hard to understand or, impossible to derive. And so there's some myths that they are sentient in some ways, or you've probably read things about, general intelligence where the AI can think. It is not sentient. It cannot think, at least right now. But I think the key thing to understand about why these models are different than the way other technology works is that typical technology is often deterministic. And so the way that your computer works, an application, your phone is more like algebra that you learned in grade school, where if you have A and you add B, you get C. And so most code, millions and millions of lines of code are written this way. Everything that works in our world with technology has been written this way to date. But AI or LLMs are probabilistic. And so it's not A plus B equals C. They work in a way where they ask, if you have A and you have B, what is the chance of C? Which is actually the way our human brains work. If you're looking out at night in a long distance and you see something moving towards you, you ask, does that look like a person or does that look like a dog? Is it threatening or is it going to be peaceful? And we use probability or the likelihood to make decisions based on inference. And that's how these models work, which is why sometimes you get really weird outcomes from the models because you can't backtrack often to what the model did. You can't troubleshoot it because the model every time may come up with a different answer, even with the same inputs, just like our human brains can come up with different answers based on the same inputs, even between me and you or me, my thought now and my thought before. So AI or LLMs are much more accurate. They feel more human-like than other technologies, but they're also less precise on the edges. And so that's why, for example, our tool Blaze produces marketing content that sounds like you and looks like you because it's able to look at things you've written before or Instagram posts you published and come up with things in the same pattern. And that's, I think, the key concept behind LLMs that are important, I think, for folks to understand, what I would replace Wikipedia with.
Yeah. My first impression here is I think, Adam, you should be rewriting this definition of AI in Wikipedia because I think, the way you just laid it out there makes a lot more sense to a lot of people. You're right. I think it is, the way it presents right now, especially this definition from Wikipedia, is quite convoluted and people have a lot of ideas about what it could be or what it is. But to really get to the core or essence of it, your definition of it, I think, was, again, very helpful. And then secondly, I mean, you did mention already the product that, that you have right now and you're pushing out, Blaze. And I did mention it off the top, certainly, but maybe we could hear a little bit more about that right now from you.
Yeah, well, Blaze is an AI marketing tool for small businesses and teams of one. It's inspired in part by my background. I come from a family of entrepreneurs. I grew up in New York City. My grandfather started an insurance agency on his own. My brother runs another startup in Connecticut, and my parents, who we grew up with, run a small business together in New York City. They're in the outerwear business. So our whole lives, we grew up watching them really successfully scale this business across the United States. My mom is an accountant. My dad basically did the customer service work. So, day in, day out, we would see them at home kind of working together to grow this thing that they had built. And we had also, later in our lives, as we grew into adults, saw them really struggle to make the jump between the offline world selling to stores and the online world selling via ads. They still don't have a website. They don't do any paid advertising or marketing. They don't use email to communicate with their customers. It's all still very pen and paper. And we would spend a lot of family dinners really exhorting them about this and saying, it's like so easy to use Squarespace to set up a website. It's so easy to use Meta Ads Manager to put up an Instagram post. You should use MailChimp to send emails. It would take us 2 minutes. And the reality is it would take people like me who are professional technologists or marketers a couple minutes to do this. That's what I'm trained in doing. It's what I spent my career doing. But it's actually not easy at all for folks who have to do marketing but aren't professional marketers. And that includes, most of the people who start small businesses in the United States. There's over 200 million small businesses in the US. There's billions around the world. But, as courageous and creative and gritty as those folks are for taking a bet on themselves and seeing it through, they really haven't been given the tools to do great marketing. They may be able to create a website or create an ad, but there hasn't been technology to date to tell them, like, what's a good website look like? Or what does a good ad look like? And how do you make it for your business? That required expertise and skill and experience. And you don't get that unless you do it full time. And the people that we serve are wearing 10 hats every day. And only one of those hats is being a marketer. The rest are paying the bills and talking to customers and coming up with new ideas. And so AI really gives us an opportunity to help people who aren't professional marketers do great marketing that grows their business. And so what Blaze is essentially a virtual marketer. It creates social media content, blog posts, emails, newsletters, and ads in your brand voice and style. It generates them You can edit them collaboratively, but then also post and analyze them for you. So it's almost like hiring a person on your team to do your marketing, like the best marketer you've ever had for, $49 a month. And so what's been really exciting, we have, millions of customers at this point. On average, we see our customers basically tripling their revenue growth due to the marketing that they are able to put in the world thanks to Blaze within about 3 to 6 months. And that's awesome to hear, of course, but it's also, I think, at like 1/10,000th of the cost of what a lot of our customers were paying an agency or a person to do before. So back to your question about what, AI is, we initially, when we started the business, we're comparing Blaze to other tools. Like Blaze is better than Canva, Blaze is better than ChatGPT, which is still true. But really our customers have come back to us and say, Blaze is better than a person, or they compare it to the alternative of hiring an agency, hiring a full-time marketer, or taking the time to do it on their own. And that's really exciting for us is not just the results in terms of revenue growth or sales we produce for our customers, but how much more efficient it is and how much time and money it saves them to do the other parts of the work that matter to them.
Yeah, it's such a fascinating example of, again, the day and age that we're living in right now. And returning to that definition of AI, it's a complete game changer. On this program here, I speak with a number of professionals and entrepreneurs. And certainly one of the things that comes up when we're centered in on entrepreneurship in particular is this idea that you raised of like those individuals are wearing 10 different hats all the time. And going back to your parents' generation, I suppose, where like they didn't necessarily have to go all in on, say, technology. Their businesses are based a lot on probably relationships and whatnot. But shifting over into this day and age that we're living in with right now, like it's almost not an option to not go down this pathway into technology. And for a lot of people, it can be quite intimidating, certainly. And I hear a lot of people gripe over the fact that they have to engage within social media. And these are people who don't necessarily want to do these things. It's not a passion. It's not why they started their business, but they understand that, again, like if they don't, their business is going to slowly die or shrivel up. So returning to you and what you're all about, this does certainly, sound appealing. And I guess the numbers back that up with millions of different customers. And I certainly had a lot of fun diving into your company and, this interview in the background on it, what you're doing. Certainly it's filling a role right now. We're going to be seeing more of this. And I'm sure your company's going to be evolving in different ways as the AI does itself. So yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. I would like to hear a little bit more about you and your business from the standpoint of a day in the life. When you yourself are involved in the business, I don't know how many employees you have at this point. Perhaps AI is filling a big role for you in that sense too. But what does it look like for you running a company like this, say on your best day versus your worst day?
Yeah. Well, yeah, just for some context, we launched the product in late October 2023. So right now it's February 25. So the business has been around 16 months or so. In that period of time, we've scaled from $0 in revenue to over $6 million. And we're on track this year to probably get to somewhere north of $50 million by the end of this year in revenue. So the business has actually been scaling faster and faster as we've grown, which is really cool to live through. But that's all been done by a team of 25 people. So we have a really thin team for how fast we're growing and how many customers we support. And so I really wear three hats right now, which is probably too many, but I'm the CEO of the company. I also run our product team, and I also run our brand team. So all of our organic awareness activities across brand and PR and social, that team reports into me. And I'm still very involved in our growth team, which are things like paid ads and affiliates and referrals and community. So almost everyone in the company still reports to me intentionally. And so to get back with that context, I wake up at 6 a.m, like to spend ideally like an hour or so preparing for the day, going through emails, getting some work done. It's also just because I wake up early, it's beneficial to get into the right mindset for the meetings to come. We are a fully distributed company. We have people from Western Europe all the way through the West Coast of the United States in almost every time zone that you can live in there. And so we are pretty async. We don't have a lot of meetings. And so the meetings that we have are really important. We try to run them well. We have our product meetings in the morning where we sit down with engineers on different teams and go over the features that they build. We have a show, don't tell policy. So engineers demo their work. We critique it together with me and the designers and other engineers. We also test every feature ourselves because quality is so important in our product. Our customers only stay with us if the product works and delivers value. So we verify that ourselves. We don't outsource that to somebody else like some other company. So we spend a lot of our time together in meetings, kind of testing and collaborating on how to build the product, make it better for people. I tend to have some big breaks in the day to try and get work done because I still do a lot of IC work. I write product specs for engineers. I write content for LinkedIn. I get feedback on documents. And so in the morning and the afternoon, I tend to have big blocks to try and get stuff done. Our marketing meetings are very similar to our product meetings. They're in the middle of the day where we go through our numbers. Every single person presents on what's going well, what's not going well, what they're doing about it. They tend to be very collaborative discussions, not just a report out. I tend to, when people come to join our company, often they have to unlearn stuff that they learned at big corporations because our company is the opposite of, performative work or overhead work. It's really about executing on your plan, delivering value, moving your metric. All we care about is, did you actually produce results, not how many Slack messages did you write or how smart were your comments in a meeting. And so our meetings tend to be very focused on substance over style in some ways. But of course, it's really fun to actually get stuff done and see customers using it and see the business growing. And so that's where we tend to get a lot of value as a team. One last thing I'll mention is that my work can take up all the time I give it, and it often does. I work late nights often, I work weekends, but I take time every day to exercise. So I go to the gym almost every day. I have a very active golden retriever, and we go on 3-mile runs together in the afternoon. So that really helps to clear my head, give me some space away from my devices to think about the business or not think about anything at all. And, for me, having some balance in my life with my friends, my fitness, my family are providers of sanity
Yeah.
that I think I would otherwise lose and would probably affect my performance as a leader in the business. So that takes time every day for me as well. And I'm glad to give it.
Yeah, I appreciate that answer there. And one thing that strikes me right away is the structure and the structuring to it, and it sounds like the commitment to it as well. Were these lessons that you learned along the way that, for example, okay, as much as I want this to succeed, I have to pull back on the reins a little bit, like you said, give some time to friends, family. Otherwise, I'm going to burn myself out. Were these lessons that you learned little by little, or were they set in stone right from the get-go?
I've certainly learned it along the way. I mean, I've been working on basically this idea with Blaze for 6 years now. I've started 2 other companies before this. Blaze is by far the most successful, but I view being a startup founder and CEO as my career. Whether Blaze turns into a multi-billion-dollar company or it fails, I will definitely start something else after this. This is what I'll do for the next 30 or 40 years. So I view it as a marathon, and it's definitely a sprint too. Every single day is a sprint, but rest is a really important factor in being able to sprint well. And so, I need to slow down and take breaks. So does the rest of the team. We have a really no message policy on weekends and at nights. No one talks on Slack. No one talks on email. People might be working. I certainly am a lot of the time, but it's also totally fine and encouraged to spend time doing things that aren't related to work. So you can come back on Monday with the energy you need to kick ass that week. Yeah, I think a lot of people burn themselves out. And that's one of my favorite ideas in startup land, is that no startup dies mid keystroke, meaning startups die not often because they run out of money, but because the team runs out of motivation. They get discouraged, they get tired, they'd rather work on something new and exciting and easier. And so motivation and momentum are really the key currencies at an earlier growth stage company for you as a leader, as well as for the team. And so a lot of the decisions I make for me and for the rest of the team are, how do we create momentum? How do we increase it? Because, if people get tired, they're going to quit. And same thing would be true for me. And the other dirty secret of startups is that it does take years to become an overnight success. It's just often a matter of reps and time. And you can get lucky, strike it quick, but I think that happens. You may hear stories about that, but that's like single-digit percentage scenarios. Most of the time, even the companies that you've heard of, like Notion or Slack, all of those companies spent 7, 8, 9, 10 years wandering through the fog, eating glass, working through the night to get to, the huge successes they become. And so really the question for founders is not, how do I hope and dream that it works really fast, but like, how do I make it through the period when it's not working? And I would say I deceive myself thinking like, oh, once we have product market fit, once you're growing really fast, everything's going to get easier. The other dirty secret is it never gets easier. As hard as it is to get to kind of get your business off the ground, it only gets harder as you grow. The problems get more complex. There's fewer people that have ever done it. The air is thinner, essentially. And so, you really have to prepare for that marathon mentality of like, if I want to get through this, I have to be able to find a way to have the energy every day to do great work and also enjoy it along the way. Because often people think like, oh, it's going to be so great to sell my company. But when I've talked to my friends who have sold their companies, there's often this empty feeling at the end of it because you're so used to having so much control and being so important and needed. And then you have nothing. And so like the struggle is is the point of it all. Like the struggle is where the fun is. And if you miss that idea, then it's going to suck all the way. So I think just learning that over time, as you mentioned, has helped me try and savor the great moments, even the tough ones of like, hey, we're going through this thing, but we will solve it together. And it's meaningful that we're doing this work. It's rare to have this opportunity, and I'm grateful for it. It's not something I have to do. It's something I want to do and something I get to do. And that reframing often can change my mentality and my energy level throughout the day.
Yeah, it's that, just as you mentioned, right at the tail end there. I think it's that reframe on it all. Going back to the process, like the joy is in the process. You hear from different entrepreneurs who realize this, and you can see how once that idea has been accepted, it just shifts everything around and allows for that sort of new approach to the business, which I think can play into a positive role, as you'd outlined in a lot of different ways, providing energy or sustained energy, motivation, inspiration, not only for yourself, but I think for team members as well. So I really appreciate that insight there. I think it's helpful to anyone who's like considering entrepreneurship as a whole, or, just wants to learn a little bit more about it, which does kind of lead me into this next segment of Q&A discovery. And also on the tail end of what you just said leads into this question here of like, what are some other, I don't know, misrepresentations that you would say about the tech entrepreneurial experience that a lot of people might not necessarily, understand or be aware of? I mean, like entrepreneurship as a whole has been written about, spoken about to the umpteenth. Like everybody is are almost the same points over and over. But based off of your long history within it, is there anything that people maybe should be keying on a little bit more?
Yeah, it's a great question. I started a newsletter recently called Startup Tycoon because you're right that there's a lot of content out there. So much of it feels wrong, and it's almost like an aperture thing where like, yeah, from a distance it's probably right like a Monet painting, but when you get up close, like what you see is totally different, and the details are what really matter. And a lot of that content that you might read about starting a company, I think, is often written by venture capitalists who have never actually started anything, or like influencers on LinkedIn or Twitter who also their job is just getting followers with their content, or people who have made it really big and have forgotten what it was like to go from 0 to 1. I think there's not a ton of content from people who are in it at the moment and going through an inflection point and sharing what it's like to experience it day by day. Even I was looking around for the people who were writing similar content, I could only find a handful of them. And of course, there's people who write about startups who have failed at starting their own businesses, which is another group I wouldn't necessarily take a lot of guidance from. So I think there's so much bad advice out there, or at least that's contrary to my own experience about what works. I don't think, companies should raise money and initially should bootstrap and try and find product market fit or traction or as much of it as you can on the money that you have before you raise. I think starting a business on your own is actually sometimes more efficient if you can get through the lonely first days than starting a business with co-founders, which causes a lot of businesses to die. But I think the most important concept that I come back to all the time is that humans love complexity. It's interesting to all of us to struggle with, think through, work on complex ideas, whether it's building complex products, having complex go-to-market motions, having complex brand ideas. But real progress often comes from doing like the hard, simple things over and over again. And in almost every job, I think our natural tendency as human is to avoid those hard, simple things. So, engineers will often do anything except to test the products that they build. Marketers will tend to do anything except actually put content on the world. Salespeople will do anything except talk to customers and ask them to pay for a product. And you can go down the line of people who work in a company, and often people avoid the point where the rubber meets the road because that typically involves failure. It typically involves realizing you're wrong and it hurts, it sucks, it's painful. And so we all naturally, because we don't like to be in pain, avoid those moments. But that moment of learning is where you can get better. And the more that you do that, the more that you learn, the more you iterate, the more you improve, the faster you move up the curve. And that's true on developing a product that people love. It's true in trying to find distribution channel that works for you. It's true in scaling your business. And, I see people come into our company who, again, just were taught in college and at big companies that like, oh, what matters is a bunch of bullshit. Like how many documents I write, how many meetings I attend, how many messages I craft. And that's actually, none of that creates value at an early stage company. I don't even think it creates value in a corporation, but it certainly doesn't create value here. You don't get any points for that type of overhead work. You get points for building a product people love and figuring out how to sell it to more people and, keeping our costs in line. That's essentially the basic, again, basic recipe. And all this stuff is it is simple and really hard, but it's simple. And the more you can focus on the simple but hard stuff and just run into the wall again and again and again and get used to getting hurt for days, weeks, months, years on end,
Yeah.
you will eventually break through the wall. You will figure out where the cracks are and how to get through, and you will build those muscles that help you run through the bigger and higher walls to come. And that's the entrepreneurs and even startup generalists who I think are just purpose built for success in this type of environment understand that, are good at that, don't mind it. It almost looks like dumb work because you're like, oh, why are you spending your time on this basic thing? But it's just doing that basic thing over and over and over again that develops expertise and skill and wisdom. That's how the best startups win. The more you create complexity, the more you create room for error, the more you slow yourself down, the more you get confused, the more you need collaboration and coordination costs. I see founders and entrepreneurs making this mistake all the time of just making their lives harder when even the basic thing is so hard to do on its own. Like, you don't need to add complexity to it. You're helping yourself if you keep the simple things simple because they're already hard, and getting through them is really the essential task that you have as a founder.
Yeah. Yeah. What I'm hearing here is fundamentals and execution, right? Is it really focusing on those fundamentals, things that are critically important, building those skills, like you said, preparing yourself for those bigger walls that you're going to have to scale later on. You're not going to get over those if you haven't put in the time earlier and learn those lessons. And then ultimately just focusing on, is it working? Is it not working, right? Execution. Yeah, I really like that. I think that that helps sort of demystify the experience, and like it gets away from focusing on some of the things that are flashier or sexier, from the outside looking in. But the truth of it all, in any entrepreneurial experience, it really does come down to two of those things, I would think. And based off of what you shared there, I would assume that you'd agree with that.
I'm sure people listen to this podcast and be like, will disagree with me, and they'll think that they knew better than me. And that's great. I was once that person. I thought the advice I got on this front was wrong, and that my complex idea is just better than other people's. And so I'm going to make it work. And the reality of building a business, I often compare it to an art project where I think a lot of founders are eventually faced with the choice of, do you want to build, are you an artist or are you an entrepreneur? I think there's nothing wrong with being an artist, but if you paint or you sculpt, you're doing that for yourself. It's because you enjoy doing it, because you want to express your ideas. And as you know, a lot of artists have trouble selling their work. It's not commercial enterprise, and that you can't really make money from a lot of it. It's still fun and enjoyable, but it's for you. And the difference between an art project and a business is that in a business, you're building for other people. And to build successfully for other people, you need to listen to them. And often what you think is right is not what they want. And that takes a ton of humility that some people aren't willing to swallow. And there's often a junction where you've just been slapped in the face enough times by being wrong, where I was confronted, I think, with this choice of, do I want to be successful as a founder, which means abandoning the things that I want to do that I think are cool or right, and listening to our customers and building for them, even if I'm not interested in it. And I think that's what I mean kind of by this like basic thing of, often what customers want is not a complex, like white elephant that you think would be really awesome to make. It's something really simple. And finding that kind of simple truth, that simple unmet need from customers, and then just like doing it really, really well, wax on, wax off,
Mm-hmm.
is how great companies are made. And most people don't want to put in the time to do that because it's boring. And
Or they're scared. I think sometimes they lack those skills, perhaps, where they're like, well, this what the customer needs right now is falling out of what my expertise is, and if I try to do this or attempt this, I'm going to fail miserably. I'm going to lose face here. And I think that also sometimes guides people. It's crazy and asinine as that might sound, like your business is going to fail, but you've got this big thing of pride there. A lot of individuals who don't want to take that step if it's scary.
there's pride. The boringness is a less sexy explanation in some ways, but I think it's more true. It's like fitness or any kind of behavior change where, like, if you want to lose weight, losing weight is actually not hard. You just have to eat less than your body uses in calories. But it's really hard to eat less every single day, every single meal for weeks and months on end to eventually lose weight. So it's a simple idea. There's no trick to losing weight. It's consume less than your body burns. But the hard part is doing that consistently. And in our business, what we have to do as a product are fairly basic things. We have to figure out how you speak and how you create content, like what your brand voice and style is. We have to generate content for you. We have to post it. And so the questions we ask ourselves today are the same questions we asked ourselves a year ago. They're the same questions we'll be asking ourselves 5 years from now. But just the complexity and the level of detail that you get when you ask yourself the same question, like every single day for thousands of days, helps you get to excellence, because that's when you get really, really deep, and you learn at levels beneath where you started. And it's just kind of like, chipping away like an archaeologist trying to find some truth in the sand. Like you get better and you find a deeper truth the more that you ask the question. But it's really boring because it's the same things. We at Blaze will not be asking ourselves different questions. And I see a lot of entrepreneurs and even people who come in our company and they're like, let me wow you with this great idea I have. And our response is always like, that sounds great. But our customers aren't asking for that. They're asking us to do this really simple thing really well. And that's so hard. It's so hard to do that. And that's why so few companies do that. But the companies that do are so successful.
All right, this leads me to another question here that I will want to get to. Is like this program, I will say, preface this program's not usually about hot takes. I mean, there's certainly enough of those on street corners, on social media, everywhere, at this point. But all the same, I'm going to break pattern here and go with one. And you venture to say that, like, by far and away, now is the best time within the modern capitalistic era to start a business. Yay or nay? What would you say to that?
Absolutely.
Kind of figured you'd say that.
Yeah. I mean, and I think this is proven on the data. If you look at, new business starts in America, they're up 300% since the beginning of COVID. So more and more people are taking a bet on themselves here in the US. And I think that's true also around the world for a bunch of reasons. One, I think it's easier than ever to get an audience for your idea. You can use the internet to basically find potential customers for your idea, to build an audience around your idea, in a matter of days or weeks. And you can do it for free. You can do it on Twitter or LinkedIn or Facebook or for just a couple $100. In the past, you would need a lot of assets. You would need a lot of money to build awareness and distribution. If you have a great idea that's right for a group of people, it can spread really quickly and really cheaply. You can also, once you have that traction, you can build a big business much more efficiently than you ever could, in part through remote work. And, you can hire contractors in different parts of the world who are really excellent at the thing that you need them to be good at for much cheaper than you probably can in your local market. Of course, you can use AI now to automate different functions. We use AI for things like customer service, we use our product to write our marketing and sales outbound materials. And so you can, even as one person with a great idea, you're able to basically operate like a company 10 or 20x your size thanks to technology. I think the last thing is more emotional, which is that I think there was an idea for many years that corporate success was the only way to make money and that it was the only way to create security or stability for you and your family. And I think the last 4 or 5 years, I've seen a lot of friends get laid off from work, be thrown astray in careers that they thought would be what they do for the next 10 or 20 years. And so I think it's changed the cost benefit analysis of going out and betting on yourself. I think in some ways, if you have the creativity and the courage and the resilience to make it through, I think one of the hardest things you can do, which is kind of strike out on your own, the rewards are so much greater on the other side, both financially as well as emotionally. I take a lot of pride in the fact that I built something for myself and made something of myself and taken an idea I had and turned it into something that other people get value from and that employs people. And so that feeling, I think, is priceless in some ways. Of course, it's great to make money from our business and to have the opportunities I do now because of it. But I don't think you get that feeling from a desk job, working 9 to 5 for somebody else. And so, yeah, I think there's been no better time to be an entrepreneur, and both in this country and around the world. And I want to encourage people to try it.
Yeah. The reason I asked that or, brought that up was that when I was researching for this, and of course, just reading the leaves all around us and what's taking place in the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years, especially when it comes to AI, like remember when the internet was really starting to blossom, giving my age away a little bit here, but when that was beginning to blossom, all those things that you just said were what, people were believing. Now is the best time. You can do this, you can do that. But now with this other area that we're moving into with AI, it's really, really opening things up. And that's kind of the backbone of what your business is all about in Blaze. One individual wearing 10 hats is able to accomplish that much more with the assistance of an AI, and I think that just really, really opens up the world of possibilities for a lot of individuals. It addresses those concerns of like, well, I don't have an expertise, say, within marketing, well, maybe you don't necessarily need that anymore. Like you have these tools available to you. And I think that, that can also sort of like shift people's mindset towards trying this out or entertaining this notion of maybe not having that corporate path or corporate career necessarily. Maybe they take a break from that and they can, consider doing something that they have a passion for, in a sense. So I really like that answer as well. I think it plays into what we're speaking about right here. Now, I do want to shift over to yet another question, and you lightly touched upon this topic already, which is scaling a business. Certainly, bootstrapping is one thing. You want to be doing this early on, but it does reach a point where, especially if you want to take that company further or build your company further, it does probably require some outside assistance. Now, I'd love to hear from somebody such as yourself who's raised millions, what that experience is like, and a little bit more insight on when that might be an appropriate idea to consider.
Yeah, well, I've been doing a lot of writing recently on fundraising. And for some context, for Blaze, we've raised $46 million so far. I also have used to run a design agency where I helped other people craft fundraising presentations and pitch decks. And I think I've helped companies with over $2 billion with those presentations. So I do know something about
I'm glad I asked
fundraising.
this question. You're well equipped to answer.
Yeah. To your question on when you should fundraise, this is, I think, something folks get wrong a lot because I think they often prioritize fundraising, as I mentioned, over trying to find product market fit or traction. I generally think people should wait to fundraise until they've de-risked the business as much as possible. Often, sometimes entrepreneurs think that their job is to create risk because they're doing this risky thing. In fact, if you're a founder, your job is actually to reduce or mitigate risk. You almost start by taking with the most risk possible. The day you start the business, you should have the highest probability that the business fails then because you have nothing. And then over time, what you're trying to do is reduce that risk down to something really, really small by the time you IPO or get sold. And so fundraising is often the way that fundraising is structured, at least in venture capital, with seed rounds, Series A, Series B. Often each of those rounds, you're really raising money to de-risk the business in a specific way. So if you're raising a pre-seed round, you basically have just a team. What you are really raising money for is to find an idea that has some traction. And so you put together a team, but you're really saying, I need some money and therefore time to find something that might work. If you don't find it, then you die. If you do, you move on to the next stage. Seed is often about trying to de-risk an idea into real product market fit to show that you have a group of people, a real market that will pay serious money to solve a problem that's otherwise unmet on the market because your product's superior. So that's you're raising seed money to do that. Series A is really about taking that product that has some market fit and turning it into a business. So can I find distribution? Can I prove out unit economics? Series B is really about taking now what looks like a business and seeing if you can really scale it. And then Series C and D are often about, can I scale to even more markets or add to new products or verticals? And so each one of those fundraising rounds is really about raising money to de-risk the business to a further level. And that's kind of reflected in the economics of how fundraising works, is that at each of those rounds, investors are buying equity in your company for a higher price, reflecting the fact that the business is less risky. Founders don't, I think, often understand what fundraising is. They think it's just like money for free. But really what you're doing when you're raising money is you're selling equity in your business. And if you raise venture capital, you are really signing up to build not a normal business, but a huge business. I think venture capital is like jet fuel, where lots of your cars, motorcycles on the street, lots of vehicles move with regular fuel and get you, 10, 100 miles. But your car can't take jet A, only jet planes can. And jet planes are designed specifically to fly thousands of miles. And so when you raise venture capital, you're not signing up to just build a normal business. And there's nothing wrong with building a regular business. I think everybody should build a regular business. But if you raise venture capital, what you're saying is, I'm not going to produce a $10 million business or a $50 million business. I'm going to build a $1 billion business within 10 years. And so you're basically putting yourself onto a treadmill from the moment you take venture dollars. A lot of founders don't understand that, but that kind of timeline I was just painting between the rounds is accelerated and the hurdles get higher. And I know a lot of friends who have failed in their startups, not because they didn't find product market fit or they didn't build a good business, but because they weren't growing fast enough to keep raising venture dollars in later rounds. And so it's almost like, rather than jumping, going swimming in a small pool outside, you're attempting to swim across the ocean and you just don't have enough, energy or oxygen to do so. And so I really encourage people to think twice before they raise venture capital. It's almost like debt in some ways, where you think the money's free, but it's not. You're raising money now, but you're signing up to produce returns on that money over the next 5 or 10 years. And unlike a loan, no one's going to come after you personally if you don't fulfill it. But the pressure on you as an entrepreneur is just the same. You still feel indebted to your investors, or at least I do. I feel a lot of responsibility to produce value for our investors, our shareholders, for our employees. And, the more money you raise, the more it's from venture capitalists, the more you have to return it in a really big way.
Yeah, yeah, I like that insight there. I think, one of the things that I'm hearing from you is like you yourself have to be prepared for it from a personal standpoint, mentally prepped, skill wise, obviously, but then also too, like your business has to be structured in such a way that it has a shot of, leveraging those funds. And I think that's something
Absolutely.
that's missed by a lot of individuals is either A, they're not fully prepared themselves, or their business just isn't. Their business can't handle it. The infrastructure is not there. And adding a ton of money doesn't necessarily solve that. Sure, you can bring more people in, but if you don't have the culture right just yet, or if you don't have a few other elements of the business set up in such a way, that's probably not a good recipe for success.
The most important thing is actually the market that you pick. There's just, really when you take venture capital dollars, especially at a seed or Series A round, what you're really betting on is that you have picked a market that can create $1 billion business within 10 years. And there just aren't a lot of markets that can produce $1 billion in revenue from zero in 10 years. In fact, there's probably, only a handful at a given time. There's many, many markets that can produce 10 or $50 million in revenue in 10 years. That's very achievable. And there's also nothing wrong with that. If you owning 80 to 100% of a business that's producing $50 million a year, you're taking home tens of millions of dollars. That's actually a much better outcome most of the time financially for you as the founder than owning 10% of $1 billion business. So really what's the art of building a startup is about kind of lucking into finding a market that can be that big. We found it with Blaze, but I mentioned I've started other products before this. Even when we found product market fit, they just weren't in big enough markets to support the valuation that we had, the funding that we raised. And that creates a lot of stress for founders. It did for me. And so, yeah, and often people will ask, what's the most important thing at an early stage? Is it the team or culture, as you mentioned? Is it the product or is it the market? The answer is the market. You can change the product. It's really easy to change your product. Yeah, culture is kind of hard to set once it's set, but like you can always change your team, how you work. It's really hard to change your market once you're in one.
Great points, sir. Great points. I got one last question in this segment here, and this is returning back to you. You've kind of hinted at, how entrepreneurship, how this experience, is affecting you in both positive and sometimes negative ways. But maybe you could share a little bit more on that. What is it like living within this world?
It's a great question. I think it's the hardest job in the world, at least to run a venture backed company. I think it is so hard to work on something that's pre-product market fit, where you have, again, the weight of expectations from your investors on you. You have to do a really big thing, but you haven't cracked the code, and there's no map to figuring it out. It often feels, before you have traction, like you're wandering in the fog through a cold forest. And especially if you have a team, you have a group of people following you, and you're trying to figure out how to get kind of through the bog, and you make a left turn and a right turn, and then you realize you're you know at a dead end, but you don't actually know how to even backtrack from where you went. It's like, because you're in the fog. And so it just kind of, you feel totally lost, and then you feel the pressure of all the people who are depending on you. And that was a really difficult period for me, really lonely for sure. Even though I had lots of people around me at my company, investors, advisors, it's just, I felt on my own. And I think a lot of founders I've talked to feel that way as well, because even when you have support, there's no one who can figure out your map except for you, because no one's in your seat. And then, of course, kind of getting through that bog and getting to the fog, getting to the steep mountain on the other side is, yeah, it's clearer about where you have to go, the mountain you're summiting, the market you're in. But, as I mentioned, it only gets harder from there. The air gets thinner, the slope gets steeper. Fewer people have ever done it, the more complex the challenges are. So, yeah, it's super difficult. It's like super overwhelming emotionally. But I love it because I feel like I experience like all of life often in a single day. Like, I was joking with my co-founder about this yesterday. Like, in a span of like 8 hours, I felt like the worst I've ever felt, and then I felt the best I've ever felt, and I felt like joy, and I felt sadness, and I felt confusion, and I felt clarity, and like it's just, and all of that in a single day. And I think there's very few jobs that give you that like slice of life where like, wow, I really lived today. It's like an extreme sport, but in business without the risk of dying. And so, yeah, it's hard, but I think the hardness is the point. It's a feature, not a bug of the job. You shouldn't do it if you don't want to experience that level of difficulty all the time. It's totally reasonable for most sane people not to. But yeah, I sometimes think about what my life will be like after this phase of my life is over, after I'm done with Blaze in whatever way that happens. And I think I'll miss it because I think it's just so rare to like have this kind of super intense and prolonged experience. And I get to work with people I love. Like our team, the average tenure of the team is 4.5 years. Most people have been on this journey with me as long as I have. And so we've been working together a long time. So it's like, yeah, we might be in the fog sometimes, but we're together. We're on the boat together, and that creates a lot of joy because it's a shared experience, and it makes all the wins that much more exciting. It makes all of the pain that much easier. And I would recommend finding a group of people that you want to be on a journey like this with if you're out there starting a business.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it kind of returns to that point that we spoke about earlier. Like the joy is in the process of it all, right? And like 10, 15, 20 years or whenever that point is, and you're looking back and you're outside of the business world, perhaps, on that lawn chair, reflecting on all of it. I think that's the stuff you're going to return to, right? Are some of the struggles, how you overcame them. Maybe not always the big wins necessarily. They could have been minor wins along the way, but it's that, and it's the intensity of it all. As you said, I like that point of like in one day you're living it all within a span of 8 hours. I think that speaks to that point. But again, I think that's the stuff that later on in your life you're going to look at and you're going to appreciate that much more. So
Totally.
it speaks to that experience. Looking at the world of AI and your business certainly being, well within all of this, my assumption is that this experience must be, well, certainly an interesting one, but also too, like a bit scary in the sense that like you are riding this wild wave of energy, of technological evolution. And it's just like the speed of it is it's incalculable almost in a sense. Like as someone who is part of all of this, how are you handling it? I mean, like part of what AI offers to your business is, opportunities to explore markets or build products that are exciting and interesting, but also too, the way that it's changing and how quickly it's changing, it also presents threats to your business, I would assume as well. What would you say to all this?
Yeah, I think there's so much hype and hot air around AI right now, and we are benefiting from that certainly as a business. A lot of people, the technology is certainly disruptive and create and actually creates value. As we talked about, the use cases we serve with Blaze couldn't be served before. We're really competing not against other tools, but against non-consumption. People who didn't know how to create content or didn't have skills to, they didn't. And so we're really helping people go from 0 to 1 and creating basically a new market where none previously existed. And so the hype is real in some senses, but I think, the technology is moving fast. Some of the hype is probably misearned in some use cases and markets. And so the question I ask myself is, okay, in this wave, when the wave passes, are we going to be like on solid ground on bedrock, or are we going to be over like endless ocean and just drop? And so I'm not as much concerned with other businesses out there as with mine, and making sure that we're actually building a real business that, yes, is benefiting and riding the wave, but that is at the end of the day super solid in the value that we deliver to our customers and in the way that we operate the business. And I think, at least what I tell myself, is that the use case, the platform that we're building is timeless. Small businesses always need to do marketing if they want to grow. Some of them, as I mentioned, weren't doing marketing before, so they weren't growing. And we are helping more of them do great marketing so that they can grow any faster. But at the end of the day, if you use our product, a lot of it is AI enabled. We're using AI to automate or even eliminate steps in a process for you. But a lot of it has nothing to do with AI. We built a document editor to help you edit long form copy like blog posts. We have a visual editor that helps you create social media posts. We have a CMS where you can plot and schedule all of your content on a calendar. We have analytics tools to show you which of your content is working. All that's actually just regular code. It's not AI. And all of that, has, again, like timeless value. People have needed tools like that throughout the age of technology, even before people were using pen and paper to do it. So I think what we're building at the end of the day is super solid. And it is really about walking a fine line of how do we ride the wave and take advantage of this new technology and all the attention and curiosity it brings, while also like building something that's not going to die once the bubble pops, which I'm sure at some point it will. If you saw recently the news about DeepSeek, there's a huge bubble forming around these foundational model companies like OpenAI and Anthropic, with the assumption that they're going to need billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars to buy all these GPUs to do all this processing. And so NVIDIA stock went up, of course. It was all based on this expectation. And then this DeepSeek came along and they showed that you could basically build the same thing for like pennies on the dollars. They spent $6 million versus OpenAI 60. And so like that was this whole bubble popped around this assumption that there'd be tons of money pouring into the sector. And I think that will continue to happen because people will get assumptions wrong about where the future is going. And I'm just concerned about, I think that if we build something of value for our customers that we know they need, regardless of what's happening in the news, we're going to be fine.
I've recently heard this interesting quote in another interview with individuals talking about AI, and it was from William Gibson, a sci-fi writer. And it goes like this: the future is already here. It's just unevenly distributed. And I just found that fascinating. It certainly fits, again, in this day and age that we're living in. And is it a fear for somebody like yourself? Maybe not so much now because you're established or you're on your way to establishing your company, but maybe from the perspective of somebody who's looking at starting a tech business centered on AI. Like what's really interesting about AI to me is like how it can democratize a lot of different, opportunities or tasks, but also at the same time, like the opportunity in a way becomes a threat because if you build a business and you're not careful about it, your business could become, erased within a year or 6 months or 2 years or so based off the technology evolving to the point that anyone can build their own tool to accomplish the task that your business was intended to do. What is that like for you? Is that something that that you worry about at different points or not?
I think, I love that quote. I think technology generally is waves of technology are really always democratize access to a new use case or market. But the thing about democratizing access, it doesn't ensure equal outcomes. We all have phones in our pockets now that help us get from A to B. There's a lot of people like my parents that still can't figure out how to navigate on Google Maps to their local coffee shop. And in the same way, yes, now any small business can grow the revenue faster thanks to content that's produced from Blaze in minutes, but most won't. And so that's the thing about technology is the paradox is the more that you increase access to, a use case or to a product through more technology, the more human motivation and creativity matter. Because in the case of AI, for example, AI can basically use past data to predict the future, but to predict what you want now, but AI can't predict the future. It's not creative. And so humans, we value scarcity, we value meaning, and that comes through using our brains to create things that don't currently exist now. And so I think the things like AI will actually increase the value of human creativity, human originality, increase the value of persistence and grit and courage. Technology can't produce that. Only humans can. And I think that's true of our customers that, yes, people who use tools like Blaze will grow much faster, will produce more revenue, more profits, have more control over their futures than everybody else. But I don't think it will produce a socialist future where like everybody's equal. I think we'll actually exacerbate outcomes. People who embrace technology will do even better. People who don't will fall further behind. And in terms of our business, I take confidence, I think, in two things. One, I think our view about the world is contrarian to most in that a lot of people believe that small businesses are bad businesses. People talk about the American dream and how small business is the backbone of our economy, but the government, banks, schools, technology companies often give the short shrift to small businesses. They don't serve them well. They don't focus on them because I think at the end of the day, they think those businesses are bad, that they're small because they're messing up. We think that small businesses can be great businesses and that they often are small for the right reasons because that's what their founders, entrepreneurs, owners want. They could be better. And that's our goal, is to help them grow and become their best version of themselves. But when I talk to our customers, they don't want to be Starbucks or Apple or Amazon. They want to be the very best version of their idea. And I think unless the rest of the world changes its opinion all of a sudden, I think we will continue to grow into becoming a very big business as Blaze because we're the only people serving this customer segment. And we love them. We understand them better than anybody else does. And, I think building a product for people at the end of the day is the best product out there. That's the highest quality product. Even if we have competitors come into our market, which I'm sure will happen because we're serving a huge market. I think so long as we are focused on quality and making the delivering the best experience for our customers better than anyone else, we will survive. And it's, again, an unsexy idea. It's kind of boring, but I think if you try a lot of products out there, they're not very good. I try other people's products all day long and I'm like, our product is better. And so long as I'm able to say that over time, I'm not really worried because I think customers are smart and they will come to the same conclusion and we'll be fine.
Yeah, there's a lot more that goes into a successful company than just the tech itself. I think it's a lot of what you just spoke about there. Now, I know I've taken a bunch of your time. I do have one very last question here. Any parting words of wisdom or advice to someone who's interested in starting, a tech entrepreneurial journey?
Don't give up. I think I probably made that point a lot here. Just keep going. As I said, it takes years to become an overnight success. Once you start your journey, you're running your own race. You can't compare yourself against other people or even against time. And the only way that you really fail is if you stop. And if you keep putting one foot in front of the other and you don't look at the ground, but look up and learn from your experiences, learn from your mistakes, and you try to just get a little better every day, you will figure it out. And I think the key ingredient there is just not stopping. And I think every founder, entrepreneur reaches a point where they want to stop, or many points, I think. But anyone you see you think is a successful CEO today that you look up to has had those same forks in the road and they decided to keep going even when it was so painful and tough. I certainly have. It is the reason I'm successful because many other weaker people have stopped or people who want to do something else. But I think that's how you become exceptional as a founder is not by having any intrinsically amazing skills to start with, but just by being committed to learning, committed to the craft, committed to the journey, and saying, I'm not going to stop until I reach my goals.
I love that. That might be a nice point to put a bow in this conversation, but I got to say, Adam, it's been a true pleasure from start to finish. Enjoyed every single insight that you've shared, and I know listeners are going to as well. So thanks again for joining the program and taking some time today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Now, for those interested in learning more about Adam and his work, you can do so via LinkedIn. You can also check out his company, of course, Blaze AI, as well as find him on X. And heck, I mean, if you're really into tech and entrepreneurship, consider subscribing to his newsletter, Startup Tycoon. And for reference, all this information, including links, will be in the show notes. And hey, I mean, if you like today's show, please be sure to tell a friend and share. As always, you can rate, review, and subscribe wherever you access your podcasts. And then, yes, head on over to YouTube. I will have a highlight from this conversation over there that you can check out. And if you do make it over there, hit that like or subscribe button. Heck, leave a comment. All that stuff does count. Really appreciate it. And finally, don't forget to join us on the next episode of Life as a. You could literally be one listen away from finding your dream job. I'm Chris Schoenwald, your host. Until next time, don't settle for less. Find the career you were born for.